Thanks a lot, everybody. Welcome along to another team talk. I'm joined today by James Yallop from Cumbria Police. James, we're all into the line of duty at the moment, so do you want to give us your official title and what you do for Cumbria Police so we can all try and pick out all the acronyms like I'm trying to do at the moment?
Thanks, Ben. I'm watching it myself. So, hi, everyone. James Yallop from Cumbria Police. I'm a Detective Chief Inspector. I work in public protection, and one of my roles is to oversee domestic abuse and child exploitation.
Excellent. And you know, in terms of, I think as well, it's important. You have a bit of football background as well. So do you want to take us through your illustrious career?
I wouldn't go that far, mate. But once upon a time, I enjoyed playing. Injuries have sadly caught up with me. But I was a keen footballer for Carlisle. Mainly played around Carlisle. And New Laves, Carlisle City, a few different other teams. Thoroughly enjoyed it, but unfortunately, I've now hung up my boots, and my 5-year-old boy is just starting to pick it up. So I'll hopefully start on that journey with him.
Yeah, that's normally where, when people go through the list of teams, that's normally where we really find out what sort of player you were. I'm sure there'll be some feedback from ex-players and teammates of yours, mate. So the idea, James, behind these team talks is that we're trying to look at recognising the role that football has to play in the wider society after we've been through probably the hardest 12 months that we've had in quite a while. We've seen some great examples of clubs who have really worked well in the community, raising money, putting on challenges for each other and coming together. But we know that there's so much more that we can do to support the local community. And obviously the two areas that you lead on are two things that, unfortunately, will have an impact somewhere along the lines with the number of people that we have playing football in the county. So I suppose starting with a more general outlook, how has the lockdown been for the police, and how have you found it? What have you mainly been dealing with over this period?
I think we've found that, generally speaking, crime overall has reduced. Obviously, people they've been stuck at home, but sadly, what that means is often we've seen an increase around vulnerability around primarily domestic abuse at certain parts of the year. People have really struggled with their mental health. Relationships have been strained. People have had a lot of financial difficulty. A lot of challenges to deal with, homeschooling. And that tension can build up, and it can create difficulties in relationships, which sometimes, spill over. And, also at the other extreme, we've seen some, sadly, an increase around domestic abuse where, clearly perpetrators are acting in an abusive manner towards partners, ex-partners. Children are sadly being caught up in that. So children are seeing domestic abuse take place in the household. And also in relation to children, they're spending a lot more time at home. And obviously we've just came through the winter. We've had dark nights, maybe spending a lot more time in their bedroom, online. And we've seen increases around online abuse and exploitation online as well. So I guess as we come out of lockdown, Ben, and as you say, football is going to be one of the main things to return before things start opening up on a wider scale. I think we've come a long way around mental health, and people are having those conversations now, particularly men, around how we feel. And I think the thing for me is that as children and adults and families return to that football community and that football environment, they can speak to one another, and they can speak to professionals and coaches at the clubs. And it's really important that if they've had a challenging time over the last few months, they find someone to speak to and someone to trust and confide in, and then maybe look at where they can turn to for support around any difficulties around child exploitation, around domestic abuse that they may have experienced, sadly, in the previous sort of 6 to 12 months.
So if we take each of those ones in turn a little bit, domestic abuse, if we start with domestic abuse, then what role do you think, having played football yourself, where can football support you in terms of, trying to talk about domestic abuse, trying to, obviously eradicate it as best we possibly can, but also to sort of refer people or, deal with it if they think there's a real emergency? How can we help you with domestic abuse?
I think there's a few different strands really. Children returning, just make sure we're looking out for them and trying to have that conversation. Is everything okay? Because the football coach might be someone they trust, and then if you get that, if a child tells you something that's happened, as a coach, you need to know where to turn, and speak to your safeguarding leads and get that advice around where to go. If you do receive a disclosure from a child that you're worried about, speak to your safeguarding lead. And ultimately, you can come to the police for advice around, if you think about what a child's told you, if they're going home and potentially at risk in that home environment, you can't leave that unaddressed. You need to speak to your safeguarding lead, and you don't want that child going back home being at risk. I think for the adults, it's about if they've potentially been a victim of abuse, finding someone to turn to, finding access to a local support service. You can get that on the Cumbria Police website. You can find it through Cumbria Together. And equally, there may be people out there who recognise that actually, do you know what, over the last 12 months, my behaviour hasn't been great. It's unhealthy towards my partner. And I suppose as an abuser, if you like, if you're honest enough to recognise yourself as someone who's been abusive, there is support available as well. Try and think why that's happened, address the underlying cause. There's a helpline called Respect. There's also local organisations through victim support called Turn in the Spotlight. And they run a programme which is aimed at, improving that relationship and making it a healthy relationship if people do want to stay together and work through those challenges. And again, if there's children involved in that relationship, think about the impact on them. So if you bring it all back to the beginning, really, it's about having that conversation and making sure that we can have an environment where we can hold that conversation to find out what has been happening for individuals, for families in lockdown, and then knowing where to signpost each other to in terms of accessing ongoing support.
I suppose from a club point of view, it's really around making sure that we encourage people to have those conversations and recognise that football's a safe haven, safe environment. Because I'm going to guess that it's quite difficult for somebody who is either being abused or an abuser to certainly if you're being abused to come out and to speak to somebody. You don't want to be seen to be looking for help, but yet it will be normal for people to go along to football, so nobody would suspect anything. So we've got to create that environment where people know that they can tell us and that they'll be treated and we'll deal with it. I suppose the other thing as well from a football point of view is that, if you are the abuser, then you might not have reached that stage yet, but if you are starting to lose your temper on the side of a football pitch watching kids play, or you've lost your temper with the referee and you wouldn't normally, maybe that's the time to look to get some support. Or if you're a coach and you're seeing somebody who seems to be very aggressive in training and is showing signs of that, then again, we can hopefully get that and say, look, do you need to talk to somebody about something? So yeah, there's lots of things I think that football can do. Moving on to the second one, and not sort of trying to rush through this, but obviously wanting to make as much use of the time we have. Child exploitation. Can you just explain sort of what that means? Now, I did some training with yourselves recently, which was brilliant, and I would recommend to everybody, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But what is child exploitation then, and what does it actually mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, it can cover a number of different forms. I suppose, in essence, it's about for children when a trusted adult gets them to do something that they don't want to do for the adult's benefit. It can be in the form of criminal exploitation, getting them to carry out criminal acts, for the adult's benefit. We obviously know what, some of the horror stories around child sexual exploitation, but it's also online as well. As I mentioned earlier, children have spent a lot more time at home on the internet, and we need to know about the risks as well around things like image sharing, where children within school, maybe within their peer group, are sharing naked, semi-naked images of themselves, and maybe sending it to someone who they trust, who they think's a friend, and then suddenly that image is shared right around the football club, right around the school, and then think how that makes the child feel, how that makes the teenager, the young person feel. So my message would be, please do not share an image if you're a child listening to this. If you're an adult listening in, just know about the risks, know about the indicators and the vulnerabilities, and how to support children. And again, know what support is out there. If you visit Cumbria Safeguarding Children's Partnership website, we're partway through a 12-month-long campaign called It's Not Okay, and there's lots of help and advice on that website around support in relation to child exploitation.
Yeah, and like I said, I did the training. It was only, I think, a 1 hour session. Really useful. Are those sessions still being delivered, or are they recorded that somebody could watch back, James?
Yeah, I think for anyone watching, if there's a specific training session you would like, either come through yourself, Ben,
yeah,
or contact myself through Cumbria Police or Cumbria Safeguarding Children's Partnership. We could facilitate a session, not a problem. Because for the clubs, the coaches, it's really important, as I say, that it's just if you have an awareness, you can, and you know what signs to look out for, and both for child exploitation and domestic abuse. If you're a coach, you're in a really privileged position. People will, by and large, trust you, and don't be afraid to use that professional curiosity, have that inquisitive approach, just to ask the next question. Someone might really be wanting to try and to tell you something, and if you shy away from it as the coach, you might be the only person that they trust. And if you can just get them to take that next step and speak about their experiences, you can take it from there in terms of getting support and making sure that they're safe and it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it's a brilliant message that seems to be coming out loud and clear around that. Football for a long time has been seen as more of a preventative tool around things, but now I think we're wanting to keep that, but also change it into the fact that we become part of a solution or breaking down a stigma. And the key thing seems to be, let's start having conversations. Let's make sure that we're publicising things like the It's Not Okay campaign, that we stand against domestic abuse, but also that we're there to support. But they have to be ongoing conversations. It can't just be a day of action, a week of action. We need to be putting things up in our changing rooms, putting stuff out on club social media, just so that when a person, or if a person ever needs whatever help they can get, they know where to turn, and they know that football stands with them in terms of getting that support and helping them wherever possible. Well, I think that's great, James. I think that's covered the main bits from our point of view. I think you do a fantastic job, in what you do, and I think on behalf of Grassroots Football, we'd like to thank Cumbria Police for all that you do, and hopefully our football will also help you by behaving ourselves when we come out of this lockdown and the restrictions, so that you're not getting called to football pitches, etc. on the sidelines either, for poor behaviour or not following guidance. But thanks for your time, mate. Really appreciate it, and look forward to working with you throughout the ongoing seasons.
Thanks very much, Ben, and thanks for all the work you do in raising awareness. Much appreciated.